Aloha, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Jürgen Steinmetz, and I'm joining you from Livestream.travel and eTurboNews. And today we also have Hawaii News Online joining us. Welcome, everybody. And we're going to have a really interesting session. We're going to talk about champagne. How much more interesting can it get? I wanted to remind everybody this session is in cooperation with the World Tourism Network. World Tourism Network was started in March of last year, so we're almost a year old, at the ITB trade show in Berlin, Germany. And this was done together with the Pacific Asia Travel Association to discuss the possible development of coronavirus. ITB trade show never happened. It was canceled just days before it was supposed to open. But we still had our discussion at the Grand Hyatt Hotel in Berlin, and that's when Rebuilding.travel came alive. And so we had been active ever since and now have more than 125 countries on board. And in December, we converted Rebuilding.travel or expanded it into an organization, what is called the World Tourism Network. And World Tourism Network, again, discussion group and a member group now with people in 127 countries now. And we have a lot of events we already did in December, so you can just easily go online to WTN.travel and look it up. And you can also become a member. We would love for you to become a member. Go to WTN.travel and click on join. Also an archive of past events and upcoming events, and we have a number of them still in February on our schedule. Just go to worldtourismevents.com, worldtourismevents.com, and to see what else is up. Without further delay, I wanted to introduce my partner and our reporter in New York City, Dr. Elinor Garely. She has been working with us with the eTurboNews group now for, God knows, a lot of years. I stopped counting, I think, but we've been in business for 21 years, almost 22 years. It started in 1999 here in Hawaii. And today she has a guest, and Blaine Ashley is an expert in champagne, and she's actually from Hawaii. We just had, before we started, a very good discussion. So everyone on Hawaii News Online, we have a Kama'aina joining us from New York today. Elinor, if you unmute yourself, I give you the microphone and the picture, and you can take over.
Okay, let's see, unmute myself. There I am. Hi. Yes, I wish that I was in Hawaii. It's certainly not a good weather here in New York, but we will persevere. I'm delighted and thrilled that I've been thinking about champagne now for the last week as I've been working with Blaine Ashley, who has given champagne the visibility that it deserves. And as I was researching champagne and the issues about the decline in sales of champagne and all of that, I just couldn't understand why other products do not have someone like Blaine representing them, because when we are not in quarantine, Blaine has designed one of the most coveted tickets in the industry, which is her New York Champagne Week. And then her second coveted ticket is to the Fizz is Female, which is celebrates the women in the sparkling wine industry. And both of those events are really, we fight for the tickets. And check to make sure that, did you get your ticket yet? Did you get accepted into the group? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. So the fact that we've been under quarantine has forced Blaine to leave New York entirely and leave us to our own resources. So I'm delighted that she's here. She's an expert in wine. Her profile in the champagne industry is among the highest globally, because if you're in the champagne business, you've got to know who she is. So I'm going to just ask Blaine to say a few words about her events and what she does, and then we're going to start with a very basic, because I don't know who's exactly here and how sophisticated or knowledgeable people are in the industry. So I've asked Blaine to just go through the difference. What is champagne? Is all sparkling wine champagne, and blah, 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 the usual basics. And then we'll get on to what's going on in the industry and why champagne is the answer. Under good times and certainly under bad times, there's no better beverage to reach for than a bottle of champagne. So, so I'm going to turn it over, the mic over to Blaine, and tell us a little about yourself and about your events and what motivated you to start them.
Myself. Well, first of all, thank you both for having me this evening. I really appreciate it. And Elinor, I appreciate your support through the years because you've been coming to Champagne Week pretty much since inception, and you always have a ticket. So please, if we're not fighting for a ticket, you have a ticket. And I haven't totally abandoned New York. I'm simply just taking advantage of the world being virtual right now, and we have adapted to the virtual space, and we're doing events all the time. I'm doing about 2 to 3 per week right now. So it's really exciting, and our reach has expanded as a result. And you're invited to those too, Elinor. So, please come. But I'd like to raise a glass to everyone. If you have anything in your glass, please toast with me. And
I got to do espresso, sorry.
Perfect. Bubbles make everything better, though, I gotta say. So cheers to that. So as Elinor said, I'm the founder of New York Champagne Week, which I launched in 2013 on a mission to put champagne in people's hands all day, every day, any day, and not just limit it to a special occasion. So people think weddings, birthdays, but really you should treat yourself all the time and pour yourself a glass of champagne. So I wanted to make champagne more approachable, more accessible, and showcase the, the various ways you can enjoy it with many food pairings, not just high-end food pairings. It goes great with fried chicken, potato chips, French fries. So that was my goal, in making it approachable and also making it more of a lifestyle beverage. So that was my mission when I first launched Champagne Week, and we've been keeping on, and it's been great. So we do a week of events in New York every year in November to kick off the holiday season right before the big push of sales for Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. So we kind of are that sweet spot right in the beginning of November, and then people just go crazy with ideas that they've been inspired by through the week to then purchase their champagnes for their own holiday parties and gatherings. And this year we did segue to the virtual space and did a bunch of events where we shipped champagne packs to people across the country. And people enjoyed these events throughout the week. And it was equally, honestly, as satisfying. It was an interesting change for me, but I embraced it and I went full force. And my mission remains the same: to keep people celebrating the little things these days and raising a glass to just like your average Tuesday and to the little things, enjoying life.
How did you expand into the Fizz is Female?
Out of frustration, I will be honest. The wine business and the champagne business is very much a man's world, and I felt that women weren't getting the play that they deserved. So in 2017, I decided to launch a separate platform, the Fizz is Female, highlighting CEOs, CFOs, CMOs, presidents, and female winemakers, not only in champagne, but also premium sparkling wines across the world, because there are other beautiful sparklings that are not champagne.
And as a result of that, we in the business have gotten to meet some really interesting women who are the movers and shakers of the industry, and unfortunately keep a very low profile. So now I'd like to go, as you mentioned, that there's other sparkling wines. What makes champagne champagne? Is any sparkling beverage, short of 7-Up, is any sparkling beverage that I pick up going to be champagne? Absolutely. And Thomas, if you could put up the slides.
Yes, I'll do that. And I wanted to just give me 1 second to introduce a very good friend of mine. I also know we got 2 great people here from Jakarta, Moody Asturi. I want to give you the microphone after this, Moody, and explain who you are, but I'm very delighted you're joining us from Indonesia. But yes, so let me try to figure out how to do the shared screen, and we can show your, there we go, and we can show your slides. Can you see the slides now?
Yeah, they're perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to put it on. I should have been.
I couldn't agree with the first slide more. Needed now more than ever. Cheers to that.
Okay, so I'm going to go to full screen and we can see it. Sorry about that. Okay.
Okay, now if you go to the next slide, Thomas.
Great. So champagne is only made in the Champagne region in France, which is northeast of Paris, about an hour and a half away. And it is aged, a required minimum aging process of 15 months. Now, many of the champagnes that we enjoy today are aged for even longer, for about 2 to 4 years even. And the longer the aging, the finer the perlage, the bubbles are. And so this is why when you drink champagne, you get kind of a delicate mouthfeel versus a bit of robustness you might get from something like Prosecco, which is still tank method, 2 weeks to make. So it's a very laborious process. And in addition, in Champagne, they have an actual riddler, one man or a woman who has a job to turn the champagne 1/4 of an inch per day as it's aging on the lees. So it is a very laborious process, and something that we were finding pre-pandemic was that people were more interested in where their wine was coming from and how it was being made. And they were reaching more for items like champagne as a result because of the process of its winemaking.
And so even though as we're drinking it, we don't think about the soil and the process. We just focus on what's in the glass. But how is important? What is unique about the soil, the terroir in Champagne that makes it so perfect for this beverage?
I'm sorry, what was that? You
asked
terroir,
the soil of
so actually, I'm going to tap Eugene for that question because he knows all of Champagne a bit more than I do. If you don't mind answering that question for me, Eugene, I feel like you'd be better suited to answer that.
Eugene, can you talk about the soil?
Yeah, you're muted, Eugene.
Yes, hi, Eugene. Please unmute yourself.
There you go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so basically, you have to think of the geography of the area of Champagne. At one time, millions of years ago, was ocean. So that ocean decomposed and turned the base of the land into what we have is sediment or chalk. So you have a chalk base of soil that is predominantly in the Côte de Blanc or the southern region, and then going into Vallée de la Marne, which is the central area of Champagne, which we call the Pearl of Champagne, where Dom Perignon Abbey is. You have a mixture going into gravel and clay. And then you have in Montal de Rams, even higher elevation, far north of Champagne, where it's a mixture of gravel, clay, and sandstone and chalk. So these three different terroirs develop different grape varieties. So in the north, you'll have Pinot Noir will thrive stronger because it loves the clay soil. Pinot Meunier will thrive in Vallée de la Marne only because of that area's geographical soil and the water source. And then in Côte de Blanc is Chardonnay. Chardonnay is king in Côte de Blanc. So the three major regions, the three different grape varieties that are used to make champagne.
Right. So you have Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier, and Pinot Noir, and each of those subregions kind of have their king grape or queen grape for the Côte de Blanc, which is Chardonnay.
Okay, Thomas, can we go to the next slide? Thomas, he's still with us?
I'm
I
here.
can't-
I'm doing it. I'm trying to do it. Give me a second.
Okay.
The problem is I have two keyboards and I was on the wrong computer keyboard. There we go.
Okay.
There you are.
There we are. So could you address the three different grapes?
Right. So Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay. And Pinot Meunier, as Eugene said, it shines in the Vallée de la Marne, correct, Eugene?
Yes, and Pinot Meunier is the highest acidic grape with the thickest skin and the darkest pigmentation. So it's very instrumental in the acidity of Champagne.
And it's changing, but basically in a blend, Pinot Meunier for a long time was used kind of as a balancing grape, like 30%, whereas Pinot Noir and Chardonnay were more the dominant grapes. But now people are starting to make more dominant Pinot Meunier champagnes.
Yeah, there's a lot of 100% Pinot Meunier cuvées being produced by winemakers that want to challenge and step out of the norm and kind of reach their chin above the bar. To actually do Meunier the correct way, you want to tame it in a little bit of oak to trying to balance out the acidity and not use malolactic fermentation. You want non-mallow, which will not let the acids or eat up the sugar so that they'll age longer.
Now, people ask, why is champagne so expensive? Of course, you can go into your wine shop and buy a bottle of champagne for $10, and then you can go a little bit deeper into the shop and find hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a bottle of champagne. Why is one bottle available for $10 and another for many hundreds of dollars?
The winemaking process. You can actually find quite a bit of grower champagnes in the $40 mark. A lot of champagnes that are mid-size are between $40 and $60. So they're pretty good value for what you're getting, for the fact that they're aging for a minimum of 15 months. And a lot of these, like I said, are aging more like 2, 3, 4 years. I know that Eugene works for a distribution company, and I believe that a lot of the champagnes he works with, there's not any that are less than 2-year aging process. Correct, Eugene?
Yeah, at Paul Gerg and Champagne Napoleon, we're 4 to 5 years minimum on the lees. And some of our prestige cuvées, we even go up to 8 to 10 years. So yeah, a lot of extra love. It's very expensive to do that because you have to cellar that many years in your cellar without seeing a return on your harvest.
And on that note, champagne, a lot of, prior to the pandemic, a lot of the conversation surrounding people reaching for more of it and buying more of it was that they were more interested again in where their product was coming from. And it really requires kind of the hand sell, and that's why the sommelier is so important, and the clerk at the wine store, because they really drive the sales of champagne.
Okay, Thomas, can we have the next slide?
Yes, so self-explanatory, Blanc de Blanc is white of whites. It is the Chardonnay. Blanc de Noir is made with Pinot Noir or Pinot Meunier. And then Rosé goes through a blending process. And there are 2 blending processes, assemblage and saignée method. And saignée method is basically like bleeding red wine with into the champagne, correct? Am I right on that?
So saignée would be when you make traditional rosé and then you draw some of the initial first press away and then let it concentrate.
And the difference between vintage and non-vintage?
Right, so vintage is a minimum of 2 years aging on the lees.
Now, is it important or to buy the vintage? One would think that the only thing you really want to drink is vintage. Will you still have a good taste experience if you buy the non-vintage?
Absolutely. I'm drinking a non-vintage bottle right now. It's just drink, you know, fresher. It's generally, it can be a lower price point. So absolutely. I mean, vintage is exactly in the name, you know, it's age worthy.
Eugene, did you want to add anything to the vintage story?
Yeah, vintage champagnes now are becoming very ultra trendy, and it's very, very popular in France and in some of the better restaurants worldwide to drink really old vintage champagne. There's actually a special glass that they have developed for just vintage champagnes, which is a wider tulip-shaped flute, which will.
There's an example. This is an example. I mean, this is a glass that was developed by Philippe Chamez from Le Crayere in Champagne. So this is
all these like advanced adjectives for vintage.
Yeah. And so the cost of the vintage champagne will give you a clearly different taste experience. Is that correct?
Oh, most definitely. It's well worth the couple of extra dollars that you would spend for a vintage champagne to explore and give yourself a much better gastronomic experience with oysters or whatever. You know, even red meat, believe it or not, with vintage champagne go very well. It breaks down the enzymes of the fat in the meat, and you know, you should really try and experiment to have some steak with a vintage champagne.
Sounds good to me. Thomas, the next slide.
Working on it.
Okay.
There we go. Sorry.
Okay, now some people like it dry, some people like it sweet. How do you know what to order when you go into a wine shop or into a restaurant?
Well, people tend to have the misconception that champagne is sweet. And those are the people that probably are associating all sparkling with champagne. Most champagnes that you see on the shelves are between 6 and 9 grams dosage. So that's sugar, essentially sugar content. Brut champagne is between 6 and 12 grams dosage. And that's what you see at a lot of, like, on the shelves. Extra brut is between 0 and 6 grams. And then brut nature is 0 grams, 0 to 3. No, I'm sorry. Is that correct, Eugene? 0 to 3?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then if you want to go into a more fruitier or sweeter, then you would go into a demi-sec or a doux.
Right. What's most popular?
I would say industry-wise, people in the food and beverage industry and in major cities are definitely reaching for a lot of extra brut and brut nature. I think the consumer goes a little sweeter, so I would say a brut is the most popular for the consumer, the champagne enthusiast. But there's been a big boom in extra dry and brut nature in the last 7 years since I've had Champagne Week, that's for sure. Almost every house that didn't have one, a brut nature or an extra brut is coming out with one.
And
they're the hardest to make too.
Which is the hardest to make, Eugene? Which one?
It is low and no dosage champagne. It is very laborious intensive. It takes a lot of magic to get it to perfection.
And the last slide, Thomas, or the next slide. Okay, so does champagne have to come from France? Can I get the
and from the Champagne region, it must come from there. So the only people that can get away with using champagne in their labeling and their marketing is what is it, Miller High Life. So Miller High Life, the champagne beer, and
Corbel.
Because both of those companies and brands were using champagne before the governing body of champagne, the CNBC, put the rules in place. So they legally can still use it, but no one else can call themselves champagne if they are not champagne made in the Champagne region of France.
Okay, and the last slide.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
I'd like to get into the current situation with champagne. If you could take it down, if you don't mind.
You know, I am all over the current situation because as an avid marketer and market to sale representative of champagne for the last 8 years, it's been all about figuring out how to keep champagne in people's hands and keep the sales up for me, for the brands I work with.
So the news is, as recently as I think this morning, there's been an 18% decline in the consumption of champagne. Now that's not hard to understand. However, as we were in last year, and the Champagne Council, the people that control that segment of the industry, were looking and getting obviously worried, they met and decided to put some controls on their product and the product development. Can you share the backstory on what they did and why they did it?
So in terms of halting the harvest time, is that what you're asking? Okay. So yeah, they again have a governing body, and they had already had a marginal decline in 2019 due to the tariff scare, because as many people on here might know, there was a tariff put on still wines, French and Spanish and a few other countries, of 25% in late 2019 in October. And there was a big threat of that potentially happening to champagne. And that caused a major halt on marketing budgets and promotional budgets late in 2018. So when COVID hit, there were a lot of fraught negotiations between growers and negociants, and they basically decided to halt the harvest. And unfortunately, it was really unfortunate because it was going to be a stellar year. It was a stellar year for champagne production. Beautiful growing conditions, no fungus. You know, it was just stellar weather, stellar growing conditions. So they decided to purposefully stop the harvesting of champagne at a certain point because they knew that there was going to be a decline in sales, and there already was a decline in sales in 2019 with the 2018 vintage. I will say that the news that drops this morning was based off of from December to January. So that's not as alarming, because it's never that always happens, because, you know, the holidays and New Year's going into July or January, which is a dry January for many people. So we're not too alarmed in the US, at least, because sales are up in off-premise and e-commerce, which we'll get into in a little bit, I'm sure.
And the other parts of the planet are taking up some of the consumption that Americans are leaving on the table. I understand a very big, and of course the UK is one of their major markets, but that's not doing so well itself. But Australia seems to be spending a lot of its efforts on consuming champagne.
I would love to get into the US, because, you know, there's a lot of non-reported facts for the US that are out there. And of course, I know some people, so I have some friends that I can talk to about. And I'm a little bit involved in the whole virtual transition and e-commerce boost of champagne sales. So for a handful of brands that I've spoken to in 2020, they were up as much as 3 of 5 were up 100% in their e-commerce sales. And 3 of those 5 were also up 70% in their retail, their brick and mortar sales. Now, on that note, they're down 60-ish% on their on-premise, which is restaurant and hotel, of course. So even though the numbers globally have declined pretty drastically, I will also say on a positive note, they were originally calling for a 30% decline, but that decline was reported in 2020 as 20% decline. So it wasn't as dismal as they originally forecasted.
What happens to those grapes that they've decided not to turn into champagne?
They dropped them on the ground.
They it's really sad. They rot. And I mean, and it was a vintage year. And a lot of people have also attributed that to global warming and also the lack of pollution in the air because people weren't out. So a lot of people across the world are saying, well, we had great harvests because there wasn't as much pollution.
So the grape growers, though, are hurting financially.
They had to drop 30% of their yield on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, and then also their payment terms are being delayed. So a lot of them are predicted not to be paid for a whole year after selling their grapes to negociants.
Well, what about the government supports? There are a number of programs that the French government has put in place in order to keep the vineyards afloat and to prevent any further mergers or acquisitions or just closures. Have you seen? Well, the news is good, and the reporting says that these financial props from the French government are useful. Do you see? Is it visible? Is it as positive an experience for the vintners as it appears to be? Are those financial supports from the government working?
I'm so glad Eugene is on here. And Eugene is part of
my guys. I discuss with them every morning around 5 in the morning because they're 6 hours ahead, and they all complain to me that they're virtually getting no support from the French government, with the exception of Moët Chandon, because they are pretty much the controlling factor at the CIVC. But the little guys and the medium guys are really struggling to keep afloat. It's very sad.
I find that the people that are most resilient during this time are a lot of the mid-sized level brands I work with, people that have people like Eugene on the ground running in New York. We have another one on here who's a brand owner, but people that are really embracing the changes they have to make quickly. So the US-based representatives are really shifting to the virtual space again, e-commerce, direct-to-consumer, retail, and they're actually creating their own sale, if you will, by rallying their own events and then asking the various retail stores and e-commerce stores to then buy their product on the back end. So they're actually working for their sale versus the sale just coming to them like we did in the past. And then many of the houses in Champaign that are being proactive are setting up their own e-commerce stores and forums. And what they're not used to is marketing. And so they're having to get used to this whole new world of marketing, how they're going to get that consumer to go to their online forum to then buy the champagne, because they've relied on distribution solely to this date.
So in fact, that's one of the issues as I've been writing about the issue, is that the marketing of champagne has been very narrow. It's been focused on weddings and anniversaries and happiness. And of course, this last year has been it's been very hard to find those moments. But and as you pointed out, there's, and also on the brick and mortar purchases, why has the industry so focused on its luxury, happy folk market niche, and only now is it starting to expand to that it's an everyday beverage, and you don't need to keep it, only for special occasions. And as you pointed out at the beginning, you can enjoy it with your French fries and your Kentucky Fried Chicken. So why now is it have they been pushed? Because this is not the first time that they've had a decline in sales. This has happened in years before this, but they've always spent they've limited their marketing effort to this very small target market.
Well, I would like to say that, first of all, I'm not mad about this because I've been marketing champagne this way for 7-8 years. So I'm so happy that brands are now becoming on board, even if they've been forced to come on board with this concept of marketing as an everyday beverage and being approachable and, pairing with all kinds of foods and stuff. But I will say that there's a slim marketing budget for champagne. Now you have people like LVMH, so that's Moet, Krug, Dom, Veuve, and they have this huge company behind them and huge marketing budgets. Before, marketing budgets weren't very big. Brands spent all of their money on travel and expenses, and those travel and expenses were imperative because you have brand ambassadors from New York going across the country to sell their wine, and then they're going to restaurants and supporting those restaurants by buying meals for clients and themselves and keeping the placement going. There's a positive, I miss the restaurant industry and we want to support the restaurant industry. It's reopening. But I think what this has all done is kind of quasi-force the champagne industry to see that there's a consumer out there and they should cater more to them, because before they were focused more on the buying power, on the restaurateur, the sommelier, the buyer of the retail center. And now, because everything is so direct consumer and e-commerce focused, they're able to open up their world. And again, it's been kind of quasi-forced, but it's been a very good eye-opening thing, I think, for a lot of the brands that I work with, at least. And it costs less money to put on a virtual event and come on and speak to them and send champagne, and they're making sales in the process. So I personally, as much as, again, I miss the restaurant industry, I think that it's been a really good eye-opening tool for a lot of the champagne decision makers. What do you think, Eugene?
Well, companies like Moet, Hennessy, they have spirits that drive their brands. They're Louis Vuitton. They just recently purchased Tiffany. So, yeah, they have the extra marketing dollars that some of the smaller guys don't have. But everyone is coming to the realization that champagne marketing has to be other than New Year's and Valentine's Day and birthdays, that champagne is an everyday event. And that's why we love having people like you in the industry, Blaine, because you're our best ambassador for promoting that message.
I will say that of the 5 champagnes that I worked with, which are text relationships for me, like I worked with them for years, they're all mid-level size and they don't have huge budgets, but they're all up in their numbers because they've really embraced this virtual event culture and connecting with the consumer. And to me, that just makes me so excited, And I just want to say something else. I have to almost read this because it's fascinating. I spoke to a brick and mortar in New York Metro, and they're at the base of a luxury residential building, which is good for them, right? Location. But they said in 2020, their champagne sales were up 136%. And their margins were up 13%. So profits were rolling in. They said people were buying a lot of champagne because they wanted to treat themselves. And that the most interesting thing was between 2019 and 2020, rosé champagne sales were up 1,229%. And this woman, the buyer, used to be in banking. So I was like, oh, these numbers are great. I love this. But I also heard recently, as recently as this week, I read in a report that the UK had the same report with rosé champagne, which is really interesting to me.
I understand that right after the Mr. Biden and Vice President Harris were elected, that champagne sales were wonderful in DC and in other
parts. They ran out. They ran out of champagne. None of the shops had any champagne on the shelves.
So what we need is some more good news, and there goes the champagne sales.
But we're also finding that, you know, your average couple anywhere in the country that's not going out to dinner every week for their average date night, they're opening up a bottle of champagne while they're cooking dinner, and they're trying to have this inventive, creative date night at home. And also the consumption of half bottles is way up because of the Zoom culture. It's a great option for Zoom.
So I think that there's an opportunity for some recommendations now. Are you in a position to recommend any particular label that we should look for, or must you remain?
That's like saying my favorite baby. I mean, I can't, you know. I will say, you know, I have some favorite champagne websites that I love to shop that are champagne heavy. And there's one in particular, it's all champagne. It's called Grand Cuvée. I'm happy to type it in the chat. And another one called Club Bubbly. So, you know, I love my all champagne websites, and they have a lot of brands that I personally love.
If someone's going onto a website or going into a store, what kind of dollars should they budget?
Well, I think that you can absolutely, you know, talk with your sales clerk and let them know what you want. Say that you want to have a champagne, but you're looking at more of like the $40 price range. And again, if you're asking for a grower champagne or a mid-level size champagne, you should be able to find that.
So my low end would be 20, and I could go up from there depending on how much is in my discretionary pot.
I have to say, I don't know of any champagnes that start at $20. Possibly a half bottle you could get for that much. But I would say you're looking at a starting amount of 38. And I would say you're going to get a really decent bottle of champagne for between $38 and $60. But I do, again, I love the half bottles because they're price sensitive, and they're perfect for one. I'm not sharing my half bottle.
Well, I think this brings us to an interesting bubbly close. Thank you very much. Oh, let me open it now.
Yeah, yes, open it. Yeah, let's open it for question, because I see a lot of activities here. Now, before we go to question, I promised in the beginning, I'm so surprised to see Moody Astudi with us here. And just for those that don't know Moody, but Moody and I were old friends. We started before eTurboNews even was invented. And eTurboNews actually was invented because of what Moody and I were involved in. And this was representing Indonesia as a tourism office in the US. And I know we had some champagne in London and all over the world. So I just wanted to welcome you, Moody. And if you want to add anything, I want to give you first shot. But welcome and thanks for joining. How's everything in Jakarta?
Well, it's thank you, Thomas, and it's glad to talk to you. Everybody is very interesting issues. Well, now it's heavy raining in Jakarta for a few years. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Well, we're having quite a chaotic problem in tourism Indonesia this time because of this COVID-19. However, this champagne thing is very interesting because I have a close friend, buddy, which is having a winery in Bali. Her name is Ibu Mulia. So she is also producing champagne and some wine. She probably the highest producer for Indonesian alcohol drinker, wine and champagne, of course. Quite a big one now, but of course it's reduced in terms of and all that. So maybe I can link up to her to be just getting a networking and all. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. I hope we can always work together to embrace everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
No, thanks, Modi. And I know Faisal also had a wine, was specialized in wine, had his own winery in Bali. So I know wine is big business in Indonesia, and we're looking forward to doing a show with Indonesia and Modi hopefully soon. But there are a lot of comments. Pamela Ott had a number of comments. Pamela, you wanted to just summarize it yourself? Would that be okay if you want to unmute yourself? If you just click on the unmute button, there we go.
Hi, yeah, I'm here. Well, because I do destination weddings and lots of celebrations, we always talk about champagne with the brides and the couples. And, you know, it all goes along with what their budget is and that kind of thing. It's oddly enough, on one of my web pages, that's Destination Weddings, under wedding tips, I actually have a page that I have information on champagne. So I had gone into this, and this reminds me I probably need to desperately go and back it up and modify it. But it's been interesting because I did know a lot about this, and while we were talking, I was over, you know, kind of looking and seeing, well, what was the sugar content on some of them and what the differences were. But I actually have it on my website for brides and people interested in the champagne tips to take a look at and see, you know, the differences between that, the bubbly that's coming from Italy, the bubbly that's coming out of Spain, and kind of the differences. So it's been just kind of interesting for me to catch up and to remind myself I need to go and update my page as well.
But Pamela, maybe you can share with us, I know where you are, but maybe for everyone else, tell a little bit about you. Where are you located? What do you do?
Let me turn this volume up. I'm outside of Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
I own a travel agency since 2001. And it began with FITs and all-inclusives and off the beaten path things like Belize, Dominica, which were two I held some different positions in. But then the clients started asking for wedding help. So then that started to go crazy. So we actually set up a second web page that's specifically for that. But title-wise, we do wild side destinations and destination weddings.travel. Now, to get the .travel, when it very first came out, you had to be authenticated. So we were first to request that and get authenticated. So we always like to brag about that besides.
Yeah, and .travel is a very good partner, if I wanted to mention this, for eTurboNews for many, many years. It's been a sponsor. And it's now owned by a company called Donuts. I believe they're in Seattle. .travel has many domains in the travel industry, not only .travel, .tour, and several others now. And you do still need to be authenticated. So you have to confirm that you're part of the travel industry. What adds definitely to the trustworthiness. That's why also we have a lot of .travel, WTN.travel is one of our domains. And if you wanted to know more about .travel, you can simply go to travel.travel, or when you read eTurboNews, we run their banner every day. Click on one of their banners. Definitely a good thing for the travel industry to look at .travel domain. And we have a session coming up on destination weddings and weddings the end of the month. Just go to worldtourismevents.com and you can find the date. I think it's actually the next one up or the one after this. I wanted to also give the microphone to a really good, loyal viewer and supporter. She's here from Hawaii, Gisao Rosala, and she's in renewable energy. And Gisao, you had a few comments. Go ahead.
Everyone, thank you. It was really very interesting. So I'm usually only drinking champagne, wine, or beer. Yeah. So in energy industry is different, totally different. Yeah. But I was really enjoying that. My question would be though for the experts, how reliable or trustworthy are the labels when I go? And that's always my question. Oh, it says champagne. Can I trust it? Is it really champagne? Because we know in every business, there are also scams. So if you could help us for the selection when we are in a regular supermarket and looking for champagne.
Well, I mean, the regulation is pretty tight in champagne. So if there is someone marketing their product as champagne, and of course we can't talk about lists at restaurants or hotels or any of that because they'll put anything, like I can't tell you how many restaurants and hotels I go into and I see champagne and I know it's not champagne. But for actual labels in the store, they'll be come after by the governing body if they are using champagne on their label and it's not champagne. So like I said earlier, only Corbel, of what I know, only Corbel and the Miller High Life, the champagne of beers, can use that in their marketing labels.
Yeah.
If anyone else here who works in champagne has anything to add to that, please feel free.
So that is internationally, basically, it's regulated for all the countries.
Oh yeah, I mean, they have gone after like kids products that have a similar, like champagne. There was a kids drink, and it was halted as a result of using champagne. So they have a very strict regulation.
Yeah, we don't recommend for children to take to drink champagne. So let them drink champagne. That's good.
When you're at restaurants, like I can't tell you how many restaurants I go to, especially that aren't in major champagne consuming cities, that use champagne list, and it's like, you know, Ruffino Prosecco. So that happens a lot, and that just comes down to I like Googling because you can't even always trust your server to tell you the real truth if there's not a sommelier on staff there.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I think Elinor was trying to say something.
No, it's also turn the label over to the back and make sure it started in France.
Yeah.
It's a great
yeah.
in a French vineyard.
Very true.
That's California, you know, it's not champagne. It's something else, and it may be fine, but it's not champagne.
Well, I learned a lot. If there's anyone else who has a question, we're a little bit already over time, but I think it was worth it. And I'm going to buy a bottle of champagne tonight. I mean, this is so many old friends here I met on this show. This is unbelievable.
Where's your local wine store?
Well, I go over at Foodland Farms, what is right across the street from me. They have a great selection. Yes.
They were Tamora's, which Tamora's is they have the Tamora's, right?
Yes, yeah, it's then we have Whole Food. I don't know, you probably don't know this one's right in walking distance here too.
Foodland has a better wine selection in Hawaii. They do, because it was the Tamora's connection.
Well, this is the perfect economy to start buying champagne. There's hope on the horizon, and it's going to look a lot better if you're raising a glass, even if it's just to yourself, that you've made it through another day. And so that's a celebration in itself these days.
Exactly.
Right. So it's a good way to start the day, and it's a good way to end the day.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I'd rather have my espresso in the morning, but to end the day, I agree with you.
Champagne is one of the only acceptable breakfast wines out there.
Yeah, I know the champagne brunch, and you're pretty much done for the day, you know, but it's good.
That's when you take a nap, and then you have the espresso, and then you do champagne again.
There we go. Okay.
I think it's converting people one glass at a time.
All right, and we got Michael Saylor telling him he's going to follow our leads here. Says he has a bottle of chilling, and he has inspired me to treat myself for the weekend. So in any case, I don't see any more hands up here, and this was an inspiring session. And thank you so much, Blaine. And hopefully we can have you on again, and hopefully you make it back home to Hawaii one of these days soon. We do still have non-stop flights from New York, I know. And the world hopefully is going to turn back to normal.
And I have my Hawaiian Miles credit card.
Oh,
Hawaii.
Perfect. I got one of those. Actually, you get the miles at Foodland, and I'm not working for Foodland or promoting them, but you get miles at Foodland when you buy your champagne, you know.
Talking about airlines, I understand that they're no longer serving champagne in the business and first class because of the pandemic. So there's another reason that champagne sales have declined.
Wow, there's no more Don Panyong on Singapore Airlines either now. Moody, you know that?
I just read it. I didn't validate it, but I mean that was you know, it makes it so. In fact, as our political leader was flying business class, I saw to Cancun, I was wondering if we were going to see a picture of him with a glass of champagne to add to the misery of the people in Texas. Anyway, there's a good reason to raise a glass and to celebrate. And so, Blaine, thank you so much for taking time from your schedule to join us. It's been very enlightening and informative and fun. So we hope to see you.
And thank you, Eugene, as well, for piping in, because he was a great resource to have here. Eugene is part of the Coteau de Champagne, correct, Eugene? It's a really beautiful kind of club. You have to be invited and invited. And so, yeah, and so he has a lot more information than I have, because honestly, it's hard to get the information. It's very private information and they don't release it so readily. So like I said, I was able to text and call a few of my really good friends with brands that I work with regularly.
You can bring some of your friends online and we can all talk together.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We'll do that again.
Okay, thank you guys. And this is going to run probably for the next 18 hours or so, after starting in a few hours on all our pages at eTurboNews, and will be archived after this on livestream.travel. So watch it again, learn more about everything you need to know about champagne. You can also see the PowerPoint again when you do. And I want to thank everyone for being part of this, everyone who's watching us on social media, on eTurboNews right now, on LinkedIn and YouTube. We're going to say good night. Aloha.
Next week is brand.
Oh, Elinor, important announcement from Elinor. Yes, please.
Yes, next week we're going to be talking to a major guru in the marketing area, talking about his recent research in brand loyalty in the travel, tourism, and hotel space. So we hope that you will join us to learn more about marketing and what makes brand loyalty important.
Yeah,
so we will see you next week.
Yeah, go to worldtourismevents.com and you can sign up and be actually part of the live audience. We had a very small live audience this time. Sometimes we have more, sometimes we have less. And it's so much fun to be live because you can be part of the audience. Okay, anyone, aloha, happy Friday. And we talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Thank you.